Yay, we are live. 7:04, so I'm close. Actually, just got back from dinner, so it was kind of right on schedule. It was awesome. Tonight, we're going to talk about turbo stuff, one of my favorite topics, and it's awesome because the thumbnail that I put up, in case you guys haven't seen it, please click back and take a look really quickly. If you see it, we're going to talk about a few things, three or four different things, just from this photo alone, and all we're doing is looking at the photo. Even if I had not done the test, looking at this photo, I could tell a number of things about it, and it's very interesting. So what I'm going to do here, I think I'm going to try to turn this off and see if our lighting is a little better. There we go. Yeah, there we go. All right. I had more pants. I very rarely wear pants, but I was out to dinner. So we're going to talk about the turbo, the photo on this turbo. This was a B series Honda that I ran at Wastegate long ago when they had the 901, and before now the 902 has a directional vane on the impeller, and I can't run reverse rotation motors on it. So this is back when I could, and I ran a lot of Honda stuff. And the interesting thing about this is that we see this is a Turbonetics kit actually for a B series Honda. Small turbo, good for mid 300 horsepower, let's say, at the flywheel. Maybe getting up into the high 300 horsepower. But turbo sizing isn't really what this discussion is about. So this discussion is about a couple of things. One, if we take a look at the one thing I look at first of all on this is the wastegate position on the exhaust manifold. There's a couple of things that I would examine on this thing and go, oh, I like this or I don't like this. So the first thing is the wastegate position, and I look at that relative to other wastegate positions that I've seen on these kind of Honda kits. So when we see a cast style exhaust manifold, this one looks like it's welded, it's tubular, maybe schedule 40 or something. But I like the wastegate position. I like that the wastegate position is centered in the manifold, meaning that if you compare it to other stuff that's other low dollar stuff that's been out there for a long time, the drag manifold, those kinds of things, and people have copied that, unfortunately. So the stuff from China has come over, and in their infinite wisdom, they have positioned the wastegate basically on one port. And although all of that stuff has exhaust pressure in it, favoring one port with the manifold makes boost control because of the wastegate makes it very difficult. It's not very effective that way. The central position that they have it is much, much better because you're controlling basically where all of the stuff merges together. And then if you're controlling that, you're controlling all of the exhaust flow and evacuating some of the exhaust flow fairly evenly. It's much better wastegate control with that position. So I like that. The other thing, and related to that, is if you look at the photo, you'll see the wastegate, the way that a wastegate works for those of you that are not familiar with it. What happens is at a given boost pressure, the wastegate opens up and allows exhaust flow to bypass basically going to the turbo. It's not going to the turbo. It reduces the exhaust energy of the turbo, lowers the impeller speed or the turbine speed. That lowers the impeller speed, and it controls boost that way. It's not spinning as fast. It's not flowing as much air, not making as much boost. That's how they limit it. So they control it by having that reference line going to the wastegate. If you look at this, you'll see that the wastegate, that exhaust flow, and obviously that exhaust, when the wastegate opens up, exhaust goes out of the wastegate and has to flow somewhere. A lot of times you'll see that just flows out into atmosphere, which works good. It works good for a number of reasons. One is that if we look and see on this photo, the wastegate actually is a closed one. So the wastegate exhaust, the exhaust coming out of the wastegate, flows back into the exhaust after the turbo. So it's dumping that wastegate exhaust back into the exhaust that goes out in the atmosphere, under the car, through the muffler, if you have mufflers, and then out into atmosphere. The consideration for that is really two major things that I like to think about when we're talking about that. One is noise. So if you vent that wastegated exhaust, you have to vent it somewhere where it's not going to superheat something, because that exhaust coming out there's going to be fairly hot. But also from a noise standpoint, that's basically an open exhaust. Now the wastegate isn't the same as the exhaust system, but you will definitely be able to hear that. So if you vent that exhaust from the wastegate just to atmosphere, depending on how long your pipe is and where it's aimed and how you're sending it, you'll be able to hear that. So you'll be able to hear the exhaust going, which can be a problem depending on how often you're in boost and how often the wastegate is controlling that. So if you're running around at 7 pounds or whatever, 10 pounds, whatever it is, and everything in excess of that is dumping out the wastegate, you're going to hear that all the time. That may or may not be a problem. If you then run that into the exhaust, it's much, much quieter. So it's going out with all the rest of the exhaust that's going through the turbo. This stuff is going around the turbo, goes into the exhaust, goes through the mufflers, through the exhaust, out the tailpipe. You don't hear it. It's much, much quieter. The potential downside to that is that if you're routing that exhaust around the turbo, which is good for control, you're routing that into your exhaust system. Now you have a lot more exhaust flow going through that. This becomes a problem really only when you have the exhaust tubing size or flow rate is inadequate. If that's too small, if the exhaust tubing is too small and you're running the extra exhaust from the wastegate into that, you're having more exhaust flow. It can't contain what it has already because of the extra power from the turbo. And then if you have a small exhaust, you can run into problems there. So if you have a small exhaust, running the wastegate out to atmosphere will help with that. It'll help with exhaust flow because you're not having to flow as much exhaust. You're flowing some of it just directly to atmosphere. And then the exhaust is only responsible for flowing basically a portion of the exhaust. So it's much better off. If you have a big exhaust, it doesn't matter. And you'd have to have a lot of exhaust flow and then back pressure after the turbo, which is not normally where we're thinking about back pressure. Normally we think about back pressure between the cylinder head and the turbo, somewhere in the exhaust system between the cylinder head or the valve, exhaust valve, and the turbo. That's where we're concerned about back pressure. But if you cap off the exhaust flow after the turbo in the exhaust system, you can also create back pressure. So if it gets really bad, you can create more back pressure there. You get more back pressure in the system. You get less exhaust flow. It gets hotter. You have a harder time, depending on how you have your wastegate regulated, you have a harder time controlling that. So that can also cause a problem. So we can help kind of cure that. Like I said, if the exhaust that's going through the wastegate is bypassing the turbo and just runs the atmosphere, then you have essentially more exhaust flow from the system that you have connected to the turbo. But like I said before, it will be louder. So those are the considerations for that. The other thing, and we talked about this, is the wastegate is used to control the boost. It has to get a signal somewhere from some positive pressure source going to the wastegate to tell it, hey, look, I want you to regulate this. I have a spring or in the diaphragm in there. I have a spring controlling that. The spring is set to open that valve at, let's say, 10 pounds. You have a reference line coming from somewhere, your manifold or the turbo, somewhere, you know, on the compressor side of the turbo, all the way up in the discharge area, the intercooler, before or after the intercooler, in the manifold, wherever. You have that signal coming to the wastegate to tell it, okay, look, I have reached 10 pounds and now it's time for you to open and then go to the exhaust routing that we talked about. In this photo, in the thumbnail, you can see that there is a reference line on the turbo. I personally don't like having a reference line on the turbo. I like having my reference line in the manifold. The reason I like having the reference line in the manifold is that the boost pressure is going to be higher that way, because you're going to get pressure buildup coming out of the turbo right there. As we can see, we've got a 90-degree elbow with a fitting there, coming right out of the turbo. Well, the pressure is always going to be higher there than it is in the manifold. And this is especially the case if you have an intercooler between the turbo and the manifold. One is you're going to have some length of tubing, where however you have the intercooler positioned, if it's it could be anything from a very short run, you have the intercooler attached to the turbo, and then the elbow coming out of the turbo going into the throttle body. You know, a la kind of SVO turbo, the 2.3 liter turbo motor, very short routing. The problem with that is the positioning of the wastegate or of the intercooler, you know, attached to the turbo there and then attached to the throttle body. That means it's under the hood, which is never an ideal position. you get a lot of heat. Heat and the intercooler, they butt heads. They're not working well together. The best place to have it is some sort of front mount intercooler where you get lots and lots of airflow. The downside to that is the extra length. With the extra length and the intercooler of all of that cold side stuff being in between the turbo and the throttle body, is that you're going to lose boost pressure there. Most of the loss is going to come from simply cooling the charge. You have 200-degree air coming out of the turbo, let's say, and you have 100-degree air coming out of the intercooler because it's efficient. You're going to get a pressure drop just from the change in temperature. That's where a lot of it is. Some of it is the number of bends and the tubing and stuff. So you're going to get some there. So there's going to be some kind of loss. It can vary all the way from as little as a half a pound all the way up to several pounds, depending on what pressure you're supplying, how efficient your intercooler is, what size it is, what the temperature drop is, all of that stuff. And one of the things that people don't realize with intercooling, and as a tangent here, is that the more that you drop the temperature, the more you're going to drop the boost. So a really efficient intercooler is going to drop the boost pressure. The thing is with a turbo, it's not going to drop the boost pressure the way that it will in a centrifugal supercharged motor. Is it won't drop the boost pressure because the turbo will artificially speed back up because it's regulated by boost. But it will only do that if your reference line is up in the intake manifold. If your reference line is at the turbo, it will say, I'm making 10 pounds. I don't care what's happening after that. I'm going to regulate this at 10 pounds coming out of the turbo. I don't care if you only have 9 or 8 or 7 or whatever you have in the manifold. That's too bad. That's why I like to have it in the manifold. So you can see in this photo, the reference line is attached to the turbo, and I wouldn't normally do that. So we have the wastegate, the exhaust flow, we have the compressor flow, the boost reference on the compressor, which I don't like to do. The other thing in this photo that I wanted to talk about for tonight is you can see that we have the corrugated flex tubing going to the inlet of the turbo. Even though we're running this motor, this particular B-Series Honda, this turbo deal, which I was testing this Turbonetics kit, even though we're running this on the engine dyno at Wastegate, and even though that side of the motor is open, and even though there's a tremendous amount of airflow in the dyno and it's not in a sealed engine compartment, despite all of that, putting that air inlet system on the turbo and getting that away from the rest of the heated block and stuff resulted in more power. It resulted in a lower temperature of air going into the turbo, resulted in more power and more boost. So it liked having a cold air, despite the fact that we basically put it in an environment that was all cold air. So even at the best possible situation, having a cold air on there was better. So in an engine compartment, that's like ultra critical for turbo applications. And most guys just run them open, which is silly. So having a dedicated cold air source is good. And this system, as you can see in this photo, obviously had that. So lots of cool things. And the most important part about all this discussion is that, and we have a lot of sharp guys here. When you look at a photo like this, one of two things can happen. One is you can recognize all of these things and go, yes, I would like this. I don't like this. I do like this. I might like this. This is the thing that I would change. What a lot of guys do on the internet and social media is they will look at a photo and go, I can't believe how dumb those guys are. They just don't know what they're doing. I can't believe that they did this and this and this and this. Here's the other thing I can say about photos is they're not the same as reality. I myself have taken many photos of things thinking, okay, I want to talk about spark plugs. So I take a picture of the spark plug area of the engine, whatever engine that is. Unbeknownst to me, because I wasn't paying attention to that, one of the plug wires is off. Or we just plugged all the plugs in and you can see the distributor and the plug wires and the firing order's wrong. I was only going to talk about the fact that we had this kind of plug in there and we had this kind of plug gap. And I just took that picture as a general thing so that we could talk about spark plugs and the gap. And what I get are comments about, you guys don't even know what you're doing. No wonder this thing didn't run. You don't even have the firing order right, and the plug's not plugged, the plug wire's not plugged in. I can't believe you're trying to run it like that. Jumping to giant conclusions. I saw this recently as a post from a fairly sharp guy who said, I can't believe they did this. I can't believe, look how the wastegates are aimed, or look how the intercooler is, or look how whatever. I'm like, the motor never ran like that. That I know because I was there. It didn't run like that. The people that were doing it knew what they were doing, but because this photo was posted and they were using it to reference something else, everybody jumped on their thing about, oh, these guys don't know what they're doing and yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, just like, that's not reality. So on one hand, the photo can tell us lots and lots of information, and we can look at that and go, oh, here's lots of cool stuff. Here's some not so cool stuff. You know, we can look at all that and talk about that. On the other hand, we also have to realize that that might not be an absolute. This photo that I have up of my thumbnail is not an absolute. It's been 20 years since I ran that, or I'm sure at least 10, maybe more than that now. And the photo that I took was not so 20 years into the future. I could come online and do a live feed on YouTube, which may or may not have even existed when I did that test, thinking that far ahead. So the photo was taken for some other reason, because I was talking about, hey, look, this B-Series Honda had a Turbonetics turbo on it. But as you can see, we have a lot of other things that we could discuss. Just don't fall for the trap or possibly the ignorance of looking at something and thinking, oh, that person doesn't know what they were doing because this photo says that they don't know what they were doing. Well, you're writing something into it because you're assuming a lot of things based on a simple photo, and that may or may not be accurate. So on that particular photo, we had a lot of cool things to talk about, and we did. We talked about 4 different things, which were all good. But again, it may well be that none of that stuff is absolute. Let's see what you guys are doing. Chuck, lives here. 6-cylinder, Sprint 6-cylinder. Talk to me about it. Brushless turbo, so I don't have exhaust coming out the front bumper. Welcome. When you're donating the inline 6-cylinder, the GT45 will do that fine. Be very responsive on a 6-liter. A GT45 is pretty responsive on a 6-liter. You run into problems with back pressure if you're trying to turn it all the way up, but otherwise it works good. Why are you waving your hands around? That's how I gesticulate. How do you get the red highlight on somebody's name when answering their? I don't know. I don't do that. Yeah, on some of the, somebody brought out air-cooled Porsche turbos have dedicated wastegate mufflers. If you run exhaust from the wastegate, you can also muffle that. A lot of cases on OEM deals, they'll definitely want to have that go through the cats. You know, all of that's a consideration depending on what the application is. No BOV for 40,000 miles. Because you got away with it doesn't mean that it's the right way. This may be GT45 for a turbo for 6-liter. Pontiac person in the house. I'm almost finished with my Pontiac video. That should be coming out very soon. I was hoping to get it done today, but there was a lot of stuff going on that had to get done. Scott throwing out nonsense. I follow like 3 people on Instagram here. Didn't expect it. See, it's a good place to be. Turbo for each cylinder. That's been tried before. Have you ever had an engine on a dyno that experienced significant compressor surge? Is the sound really noticeable? Yes, you can hear that, especially on D-cell without a bypass valve. How about a low restriction muffler test for turbo engines? I would like to do that. Freiberger might have done that. They may have done an exhaust test on a turbo deal. James, so you want a poll for tonight? Okay. In honor of Liv being here, the poll will be about her. Will the Sprint Pontiac, will a Pontiac Sprint 6-cylinder ever get boost? How's that? Will a Pontiac Sprint 6-cylinder ever get boost? And I should have put Liv's in there, but no more 4-cylinder or 6-cylinder video, please. Do people even watch that stuff? Yes, everybody does. In fact, for the longest time, my most popular video was a 6-cylinder. It was the 4.3 liter with the blower on it, I think. Yeah. And there's no kitty cats purring. I swear I'll have that overhead cam 600 pulled in early August. I'm out of town. Okay. Oh, no worries. I've seen some of your stuff. How do I send you an email? I run a Brig Block Chevy idea. My email is as follows. And that's my email. What do you think about doing a turbo 3.9 liter V6? Everything needs boost, so that's a good idea. How much boost can an ACR Viper take in stock form? I don't know. I think that they do stuff to those to make them run a lot of boost. But I know everything will take 7, 8, 10 pounds or something. Can I go too tight with LSA on a supercharged motor? Not too worried about mild horsepower loss. Well, you're not going to get on a tighter LSA is probably going to improve power through most of the curve, except at the very top. One thing you're going to fight is idle quality is going to go down and drivability. You want a Mercedes Zonda turbo motor? Richard, did you get my email about the timing wheel count? I haven't seen it unless it was just sent recently. Terry, you want to see a blow-through quadrajet on the overhead cam Pontiac? I don't think I've ever done one of those. Is that possible? Everything does need boost. What's a good size turbo to use on a stock 5.3, all rebuilt, upgraded valve spring, sloppy stage 2 cam? Just tell me how much power you want to make. If it's 700-ish, then do a GT45. If it's 1,000-ish, do a 7875 or an S475. Oh, the Mercedes V12. I really wanted one of those. The V12 sedans. It's pretty gangster. I believe a non-red-eye Hellcat can handle 20 pounds. So right at the end of the stream, we're asking about the timing wheel count for a few days. The timing wheel count on the on which one? On the Nissan? I want to make 700 until I make 700, then more is better. Yeah, 800. I'm an old 90s Ford V6. I've already done a Stoker kit, but I'm looking to do more. What would a good size turbo be? 300, 400 solid. A GT30 76, like the max speeding stuff, any of those would be good for that. Oh, the North Star. Yes, the North Star. I do want the trigger wheel on that. We looked that up, and I kind of have an idea, and I think I'm leaning toward we're probably going to have to put a trigger wheel on it. Todd, I think we talked about your install, right? Did you end up doing the hot side and the cold side on the turbo stuff? I'd like to see it, man. Did you see that DDE is thinking about buying an SLC with a twin turbo Gallardo drivetrain that makes 900 horsepower? That's very cool. Who is DDE and what is SLC? So you got to spell it out for me. Can I bring in the Quadrajet for the blow-through project? Do you have one already? I guess I could talk to Sean Murphy. Maybe he's done one. Found some posts from Megasquirt that look legit. Okay, cool. They should know. And I have that MS3 Pro, which would be great. Could you push more boost through a stock 302 with a centrifugal blower versus a turbo? I don't know about more at the top, but having more in the middle is probably going to cause a problem. The other problem, though, is that with the turbo, you're going to make a lot more power at any given boost level. So turning the boost up on the blower, it requires more drive, and you're not going to see that as power, but it is there. I want to see a 4.2 liter Ford V6 after the Iron Duke. I do want to do an Iron Duke. I want to do I just want to run the North Star, and I just want to run an Iron Duke. I just want to run it with a turbo. Yes, and I need to finish the Mopar too. Man, that's been a long time. Oh, daily driven exotics. Okay. $700 to $850 will be fine to the wheels. That's a big spread, but the S475 is going to be the one that you want. Having to wait till I get new brackets for my power steering. Does a ProCharger need a different kind of boost cam than most superchargers? Well, a ProCharger is a supercharger. And so a ProCharger and a Vortec and a Torque Storm and a Paxton and the old Powerdynes, all of those are centrifugal blowers. So all of those, if there was a difference in blower cams, those would all be the same. And then the positive displacement blowers, a lot of guys like to run different cams in them, but you know what I say. I don't think a positive displacement blower cam is the right way to go. Something that kills low speed and mid range power and adds more top end. I don't think that that's necessary. They all should run the same camshaft. Tried 12 pounds of boost on a 5-liter Ranger with 93 octane. Long story short, I've got a new set of heads and gaskets. Yeah, tune can be a problem there. Wastegate delete. Yeah, that'll do it. Our 2-volt mains, 350 is capable of running 10 to 12 pounds of boost. That's not the right question. The boost is irrelevant. If you have a 200 horsepower 350 that runs 15 pounds of boost, it's only going to make 400 horsepower. But if you have a 400 horsepower one or a 500 horsepower one NA, then it's going to make 800 or 1,000 at that boost level. And 12 pounds and 15 pounds there's a big difference between those two. So a lot of it's going to come down to a lot of different things rather than just the 2-volt, 4-volt thing. How do you hook up marine engines like that FE for Dynapools? How do you hook up the water-cooled exhaust? They probably didn't run the water-cooled exhaust, I would imagine, on that, because they don't run water-cooled exhaust on the dyno. Otherwise, it just goes all over the back of the dyno. The water pump stuff, normally on jet boat motors or that kind of deal, they just feed water in, and if it doesn't have a water pump, they just feed it. I think that one had a pump. How would the air doors open on a Q-Jet on a blow-through configuration? Don't they open with vacuum? See, I don't know. I haven't ever seen a blow-through Quadrajet. I'm not saying it's not possible and that we couldn't figure it out. I mean, I might be able to look at that and figure it out. You could house the Quadrajet inside an enclosure probably and make that work. I will be doing the more Buick testing. Are there any engines you work with that hated boost? I haven't run it yet, but I'm fairly convinced that the Slant 6 doesn't seem to like boost. Dulcich has tried it several times and had not very good luck. And maybe it's just a head gasket thing. Is 106 LSA too narrow for a supercharged motor? That 106 LSA doesn't tell you enough about that camshaft, but no, it's not. You can run any LSA on a supercharged motor. I've never tried a VR6 motor, not on the engine dyno. We've run some on the chassis dyno. Yeah, Casey, if you put it inside the enclosure, you would not be able to hear the cool quadrojet noise. So will a Pontiac Sprint 6-cylinder ever get boost? 80% are saying yes. So that's really good. I can tell you when we ran the quadrojet on the Pontiac, which that video is coming up, when the doors had too much spring rate on them on the dyno, you could feel them because they didn't open until after we released the dyno, and you could feel it. Woo! And it's like it sounded like VTEC. It was kind of awesome. Did Steve throw me under the bus for the head gasket on Slant 6? No. Why did you send him a head gasket? It's just that he's not had too much luck. He's tried it a couple of times with boost, and it's not worked out very well. Richard, do you think you'll do any more 4.3 liter V6 stuff? Not a big bang on the 4.3 liter, I don't think. But I would like to build another one of those. I kind of like those motors. I have a Buick 350 sitting in the garage. No idea why I kept it for 20 years. Well, now is the time to take it out and make it run, right? Liv, I saw your post on interesting audio on the post. But if that's going in the Pontiac, it needs to have a tri-power. Oh, I replaced it the second time with him, but he was iffy about the quality of the gasket when he assembled. Okay, that can be a problem. It just needs it really needs an MLS gasket probably. Same thing with the Cadillac. I think if given the cylinder pressure that those things are producing and the RPM range that they're running, I mean, when we're getting full boost at 2,000 RPM or whatever, it needs to have some head gasket. So, Mike, the 2JZ rod is similar to a Gen 4 rod. If you're going to do a Slant 6, you're going to need Tony Self, sure. Especially with a turbo, right? Carb hats on quadrojets can deform air horns, apparently. That's why you'd seal the whole thing in. Best mufflers for V6s, just whatever flows and sounds like the way that you want it to. You mentioned the 4.3 liter V6. I know you've had it in the 4.8 liter V8. Have you, or might you be testing the 287 horse LV3? I don't have one of those, and I've never run one, but I'm hoping to run one back with Brian. And I thought that they have a 300 horsepower version of one of those, but is that the LU3 maybe? It's the LT1 based version. Do you have any misgivings, Grooves? Do you have any misgivings reusing a rod that's spun a bearing and it's turned blue on the big end? I do. I personally don't like to do that. I don't ever remember actually doing that. When they discolor like that, I don't even have them resized or anything. I just throw them away. And it might be that's reactionary on my part, but I just don't. It just doesn't give me a warm, fuzzy feeling. Somebody's asking, does a shorter stroke engine benefit from boost more than a longer stroke engine? No, they both benefit the same. Boost is just a multiplier of whatever they're doing in a. Do you know anything about 3.2 liter single overhead cam V6s? Is that the J series? How much turbo can a stock 430 Buick take? I have no idea. Torch pistons and rods. Also odd clicking coming from your audio. I don't know what that is. Yeah, we'll send them the points distributor, Casey. That's right. You run several intakes on a small block Ford. I just did all the GT40 stuff. How would those EFI intakes compare to a Holley Sniper or an Edelbrock single plane intake or a 750? An RPM air gap would be, or RPM would be a much better choice on this combination because of the RPM range that we're running. A dual plane is a way better choice. Single plane, not good. The 4-hole Sniper throttle body things, I'm not a fan, so I wouldn't use those. But a carburetor on the intake, you're going to see how they compare because I have a carburetor versus the EFI stuff coming up. And although I was going to wait and see if that was maybe a test or a discussion for another live feed, but I got a lot of comments doing the testing on the GT40 stuff, and guys were like, well, yeah, but you should have run this intake or this intake or this intake. First of all, on 5-liter Fords, like with the LS, and more so back in the day than modern times, but I tested every intake, so I know what they all do. I didn't choose these 4 intakes because I thought that they were the best. I chose these 4 intakes because they were all GT40 related. They were all family members, and so I wanted to compare what they all did. And that's why we chose those. I know what the Trick Flow does. I know what the RPM 2 does, if they still have those, the Performer, you know, the ones that I haven't tested, which I want to test. And this is maybe not a great combination to test on, at least not unless I put more camshaft in it. But I'd like to test the high ram on this because I think that it would work very well. I think the high ram probably needs more motor than this. Like I'd rather test an 8.2 deck high ram on maybe a 347 or something that's going to want to make some power. I saw a picture today of a Pontiac intake with 5 carburetors. It looked like a dual plane, 2-barrel manifold with a carb over each side of intakes. Yeah, I've seen that also. I've never tested it, but I think that the carbs on all of those were Strombergs and not these 2Gs though. Any plans for a tour to SHO? That would be cool. I'm a big fan of those. There is a fan running on the computer. Could you run boost into ITBs with a box or the ITBs? You can, but then it just becomes the same thing as a non-ITB deal. I know guys think that because the throttle blades are down lower or whatever, or somewhere in the manifold, that there's some kind of benefit. But honestly, once those are open, it's just a manifold. It's just a common plenum manifold. It's no longer an IR manifold. 427, 10.5 to 1, 106 LSA, 100 centerline, 256, 264. How much is too much boost? On the 85, I want to be under 900 horsepower and safe EFI. Well, 900 horsepower on that combination with boost is going to be very, very easy. So is it Hot Shots or Hot Shots Part 2? Thoughts on the new dual carb sniper kits? I don't know what that is. You'd have to show me a picture of it. Anyone watch the Lawnmower Carb V8? Yes, I've seen that. Do you think that the throttle body injection will become consistent and worth buying? I don't know. Ever run twin GT35s on a 6-liter or 6.2? No, what did I run those on? I think, did we run those on a 4.8 or a 5.3? I can't remember what I did the test on. We ran twin GT35s on something. I don't know if it was a 6 liter, but they all work the same. Probably done to death question regarding your back-to-back turbo testing on a K24 seems to be the Precision 6260. I don't think it's a 6260, but it is some kind of 62 variant, I think. Right now, that turbo is actually on my buddy's J Series Honda that he has in an NSX, and it's gone to 600 plus wheel horsepower now. So it's working good, and it is a good turbo. Where are we at on our? Will the Pontiac Sprint 6-cylinder ever get boost? 79% saying yes. Liv, are you listening to that? 79% are saying that that's going to happen. Exhaust goes in and goodness, boosted goodness comes out. Are there any engine building books? I have a whole bunch of them up here for the different specific engine families, and I like a lot of those. Cartech and SA Designs and those guys. Lots of different guys have read them, and I like going to them. Some of it's fairly old, but I like going to those to learn some of the things that you may or may not know about an engine family that you're working with for the first time. So all of those are good. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, hit the blue jug, do all that stuff. No, it's the blue cup. It's either the blue cup or the red cup. That's how you determine the turbo size. You're going to be hearing the black helicopters. That would be only if I was transmitting from, where is it? They have a new show about it on the History Channel. Skinwalker Ranch. That's only if I'm transmitting from Skinwalker Ranch. A J Series is an excellent motor, but I think, and I've been talking to my buddy Jimmy about this. I kind of feel that if I wanted to make a lot of power, I would pick that over a K Series. If only because you're distributing the amount of power that you make into more cylinders. So I think a lot of times that can become beneficial. Until it pops. Liv, we can run it. We can run boost on it as long as we don't run the same head gaskets on the on the slant six. It's just the cast intake on the J35 is ridiculously heavy. Yeah, but they put the Holley high ram lid on those now, right? And I think I would pick a J32 over 35 anyway. There's a guy who uses epoxy to put 1,400 wheel horsepower through a stock J series block. Yeah, when you start getting up into those numbers, they start being concerned about block integrity. It would be really good to get turbine drive pressure. You mean back pressure? Turbos make more power over superchargers. They don't have the parasitic loss associated with driving the blower, so they're normally going to make more power. Can you run steel shim gaskets with boost like an MLS gasket? If that's what you're talking about, then yes. Were people really enthusiastic about the Ford Thunderbird turbo? Yeah, the turbo coupe was cool. It had a bigger intercooler than the SVO Mustang because that was one of the upgrades. The motor wasn't, I don't think, ideal. You know, it would have been better if it was a modern kind of 4-valve deal, but guys made a lot of power with them. Is it worth buying a blow-through carb boost or go Sniper EFI? I myself like port injection if you're going to do a throttle body, like a 4-hole throttle body. That's the way that I would go. Yeah, it's easy to make the J series stuff. It's easy to make really big power with those. Yes, yes, I am. Guess it's a Terminator 2x4 sniper kit. Has dual quad sniper throttle bodies. I've seen I've seen some of the sheet metal fabricated. I don't know if they call them sniper because they use that word on 15,000 different products, and in my opinion, it's very confusing. But I've seen some of the fabricated sheet metal intake manifolds um, for small block Chevys and stuff, and they don't work. And especially even worse as a single 4-barrel tunnel ram style. BP, that's going to be a good combination. Anything that you do with a 5-liter, put heads cam and intake manifold on it, put a small turbo on it or whatever. A Ford V10 with a turbo would be good. I mean, the solid steel shim gaskets they used back in the day. I don't know which one you're talking about. I don't remember guys using solid steel shims. I remember them using copper a lot, and that's still done now, or using the receiver grooves for the O-rings, but I don't know about a solid steel shim. They did use Chevrolet used steel shim head gaskets. They had them from the factory, and a lot of guys go to that in the roundy round stuff because it's so thin it raises the compression. Could be a Dodge V10 too. I would rather do the Ford, but and the turbo coupe had different that turbo that they use, you could get different hot sides on them to make them more responsive. They had a 48 and a 62 and an 83, I think, or a 63 and an 82. 4, 6, and an 8 in any case. Velcro has compressible shims that you put in between headers and pipes. Cool. A6 turbo coupe I worked on, took a while to spool, and they had different turbos on the sticks than they did on the automatics. 48, 63, 82. That's what I thought. Yeah, if you're going to do a V10, it's got to have at least 2 turbos on it, and maybe more. An L8T is a good one. That's good for making lots of power. I don't know what people mean by steel shim head gaskets. Liv, you voted yes. See? Well, your vote is the one that counts, obviously. Put this down toward the Triton Turbo, baby. Mike, thank you very much. $4.99. Tree Fitty. If you stay under 52.50, your 302 will live. Okay, Scuba Sam, I'll take a look at it. I know there's a company that makes a roots blower. It'd be easy to, I mean, not easy, but putting one of those blowers on, you just fabricate the manifold. That's not a big deal. For the stock bottom end, if it's a 302, you need to at least put ring gap in it. And I don't know what year that is, but if it's a 302 and it has forged pistons in it, we beat the heck out of them. BP Power Adder 540, what would you use for a single turbo? You just, Andrew, the answer is always you need to decide what power you want. There's no ideal turbo for that motor. There's a turbo that would allow you to make 600 horsepower. It's going to have a lot of back pressure because the motor already makes 500 and something, or 600 and something. But you choose the turbo for the power that you want. If you want to make 1,000 horsepower, you put 1,000 horsepower turbo on that motor. I put a really big hot side on it, or pick 2 of those, or 2 of them that will make 1,300 or 1,500 or 2,000 or whatever the power you want. That's the turbo that you pick for it. Nobody seems to care when the pin end is blue from heating the rod to press the pin in. Yeah, but if we impart the heat into the rod, that's okay. When the motor does that, we don't like that. I'd be interested in a turbo test to see if running rich or lean helps turbo spool. Rich mixture should help cool exhaust charge. Rich are either turbo the V10 or 6.2 liter. Yeah, Bill, the 50,000 shims only work on iron heads. They only ever ran those on the iron headed stuff. I actually haven't, Scott. I haven't heard from Oliver. I need to get a hold of him because I got a bunch of stuff for him. I heard from him when I got back, right when I got back from Wastegate. Mike, you can weld your heads to the block. Porsche did that on their Le Mans cars. Scout will make a Viper pattern crank to fit the Ford V10. What is a wide length running shoe? The 6.2 has so much more potential with just a turbo and ring gap. Would DJT be a turbo or supercharger kind of guy? Who's DJT? Liv, is Rick doing anything with the dragster at Westec? No, no, it has just sat up there since the 90s. Although they did, the motor that's in it was built and ran on the dyno and then stuck in that car, and then so it's, I don't know what condition it's in now, but it was a good tunnel ram big block. Does Westec ever answer the phone? Yeah, sometimes. Would putting a turbo on a stock 318 be a good idea? Worf, I'm curious how you pick like 8 to 10 pounds. What makes you decide on that number for a stock one? I'm just curious. I just want to know what the thought process for people thinking that's an amount that they want. Or T-Bird 6.3 exhaust housing to fit a 466 international cartridge. Built 200 Ford back in the late 90s. Nice. I come here to take a break from the news. I've always been curious about twin charging engines. Could you feed a Pro Charger with boost from a turbo, or would the blower be too much restriction in airflow? That really wouldn't be the combination that you would want. You wouldn't want to have a centrifugal blower and a turbo. I have twin charged videos up on the channel already, but what normally people would do if they're combining a blower and a turbo is you want a blower that's going to help the low speed power to get the turbo spooled up, so you can use a big turbo to make lots of like top end power. And so normally they put some kind of roots blower or some sort of positive displacement blower, like a twin screw or something. A centrifugal is not a good idea because it just has a rising boost curve, and having it and a turbo is it's just going to be nothing but problematic and not beneficial. Coming to the chat with a Pontiac pull up, absolutely. We like that, and it's not only just as it is a Pontiac, but it's a super other guy's Pontiac, a Sprint 6-cylinder with boost. Well, with potentially having boost. 23% saying no. Come on. Have you done any testing with boost on dimple ported heads? I never tested dimple ported heads, and they're not going to affect what boost does. How about testing compound turbo setups with different turbo sizes to document the response difference? I don't know what I would test that on. For most of the applications that I run, a compound setup is a waste of time. It's a waste of time on a lot of gas engines. It's much more applicable to diesel stuff than it is to gas engines. LSX Hunter. No, a 301 draw-through system is awesome, and I would love to try one. Not that they make power, and I wouldn't be doing it for that. I would be doing that because it's OG and it's cool. Richard, what's the right amount of power for a 3,000-pound car? It's the amount of power that gets you the goal that you have. So I'd rather have the car be lighter than that if we could. Like a 2,000-pound car would be really, really good. But if you want to run 10s, it's whatever that amount of power is that gets you to run 10s. If it's to go 200 miles an hour, it's the right amount of power that gets you to go 200 miles an hour. If your goal is to get 50 miles per gallon, that's going to be pretty hard, but it's whatever is going to do that. So you have to set your goal up for that. Crown Vic 4.6 modified 93 Victor aluminum intake, custom adapter plate, modified 2001 Pontiac M90 supercharger to fit, use bypass. Good idea. Are you turbocharging that? Because a stock 4.6 liter and an M90 are not going to be a good fit. The M90 is not going to make hardly any boost on that. I didn't watch the 2,000 horsepower VW. For extreme examples like that, if you're trying to do crazy things where you have to have a gigantic turbo and then you have to use the little turbo to get that thing, up and going, that works. But that's not the kind of thing that I deal with. E85 or meth injection for what? So I want someone to answer if we can shoot nitrous into the system in different areas. But what do you mean by different areas? You can inject nitrous into all kinds of different places of the motor. An M90 spun up a lot, and M90 doesn't flow very much. And a V8, like a 4.6 liter, like the 4.8 that we ran. So if you have a 300 or 400 horsepower NA V8 and you're putting an M90 on it, you're just kind of spinning your wheels. 4306, 3000 stall, 410. Should I run a smaller turbo? Well, you got enough gear and you got enough stall speed. A T70, like especially if you're talking about a T70 that's an offshore brand one, like a CX Racing or those kinds of things, is going to be kind of small for a 306. Do you know of any budget mirror image 58 millimeter turbos for twins on a 6.2 liter for 800 horsepower? I don't. The only mirrors I know are Nelson, and I think Virant has some of those at VS Racing, but I don't know specifically about 58 millimeters. Okay, BP. No one's going to argue with you. You can put on whatever you want to put on. If you know what the flow rate is on an M90 from like a Grand Prix or something like that, and you try to put it on a V8, which I've done a couple of times now. As a matter of fact, to give you an idea, when I ran it on the 4.8, the 4.8 was like a 400 horsepower 4.8, and I put the blower on it. I put the blower on it with a stock pulley, and it didn't even make as much power as the stock NA motor did. So the blower created vacuum. So it just didn't work, because you first of all have to deal with the loss of driving the blower, so that brings you down in power, and then it's not spinning fast enough to make that back up because the motor already wants more airflow than the blower can supply. Now you could spin the thing up a whole lot, but you'd be way better off on a V8 putting more blower on it. But like I said, I want you to try it. Yeah, turbo to vehicle, what we expect to happen, gas mileage every day. For the vast majority of people, if they add a turbo to their car, their gas mileage goes down, only because they're using it a lot. As an actual steady state cruise, that would be a different story. But most people don't do that. They use it more. And when you use it more and go into boost, you're much richer than you were when you were running NA. So your fuel mileage tends to go down with boost. Richard, could you spray more nitrous on a turbo motor under boost than NA? You could theoretically, but will it take that though? I don't know. You know, that's kind of an interesting question. I don't know if are they still going to process that? Will we run into head port volume or something? No, I think you could. Too big of a turbo would be better for mileage. If you're just not going to run boost, why would you put the turbo on there then? You have a 306 cylinder head that flows 226. That's a lot of flow for that head, isn't it? Cam is 225 at 50. That's turbo is the GT 3076R. That will work good. That will make good power. The CVT transmissions people are talking about actually work fairly well. I had a 6-speed Nissan Versa, And back at the time, Brule had a CVT Versa, and we went out and staged him up in drag race, and it was like a dead even race. I thought that the stick would kind of kill him, but the CVT worked really well. The CVT is nice though because it keeps you in the effective RPM range where you're making power. Have you done any dyno work on out-of-the-box dart iron SR heads on, say, a flat top 351? If so, how do they do? We like a Windsor Senior, is that what that is? I don't know exactly what head that is. Take a look on the big head test that I did and see if those darts are up there. When will a 6.0 tap out boost-wise on a GT45? A GT45, the turbo will tap out way before the 6-liter does. '93 Coda, you worked Cobra. I worked on development dyno lab testing. That's very cool. EcoBoost 3.5s and 2.7s, and they have higher fuel consumption from half to full throttle than Coyotes do. So that would make sense because if you're in boost, you're going to be richer. Now a lot of the OEM stuff, and it scares the heck out of me, they run lower boost stuff, like very, very lean. Most tuners are going to be like in the 11s. I've seen a lot of that stuff be in the 14s. And so that kind of scares me. But the more that you're in the 11s rather than being in the 13s at that kind of throttle angle, under cruise, you're going to be lean, like 14.7 or sometimes even leaner than that, depending on what you're running. But the more time that you spend being at 11.8 instead of 12.8 or 13, obviously the more fuel you're going to use. Okay, the Ford 6-cylinder is ported. Oh, and they're direct inject. That's right. Jim, you need a boost cam. Yeah, Rocket, they have the CVTs that make it because they want people to have the oral gratification. They want wah 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 because we hear on the TV or in movies where guys are shifting 15 times. You're like, dude, there's no more gears left. You went through all the gears and then apparently went back down and then went through all the gears and now you've done that 3 or 4 times. Let's see, just want to help the higher rev range, 4,500. The stock 318 heads are known to be a bit wheezy in that RPM range. If it's, I don't know what 318 you have. If it's an LA motor, none of those heads were great. The J heads were not bad, but again, not anything like a modern head. Even the Magnum heads, but the heads like on a Magnum motor, if it's a stock one, you're contending with 3 different issues there. The head is the least of your troubles there. Ultra long runner manifold, very mild cam timing. And so it's not that you can change those things to get them to make power at a higher engine speed, but all of those things from the factory are designed to run power in that range. Did you ever do a comparison on intake manifold before and after extrude honing? Yeah, it was long ago, and it's obviously getting the airflow change was dramatic. So whether or not your motor can take advantage of the airflow gain is one thing. Also, and this is something to think about, if we extrude hone like a GT40 or a Cobra intake, not a GT40, but a Cobra intake, something that's cast aluminum that we can hog out quite a bit. Even if we improve the flow rate dramatically, you still haven't changed where that intake manifold is going to want to make power, because it still has the same runner length. Making it bigger and flow better might shift that a little bit, not dramatically, not like shortening the runner 6 inches. That'll have a big effect. Porting it, making it flow more, has a tiny effect. It will help flow, but can the thing now take advantage of that extra intake flow in that RPM range, given its limitation of displacement and compression and cam timing? You put it on a bigger motor, it will take more advantage of that because it's still running in that RPM range. If you shorten the runners, you can add more power. And then the question of cost, that's a personal thing. I don't know what is worth. Is 5 horsepower worth $1,000? Is 5 horsepower worth nothing? Is 100 horsepower worth $1,000? Like, I don't know what your scale is. Have you done any boost testing on SVT Focus lately? I have, like a new one. I have not. We ran boost on the old SVT stuff back like right after I had my Z-Tech motor, but not since then. What resource do you recommend for information for transmissions? I have no idea. And we discuss that from time to time on this channel, and that's that it's easy to make 1,000 horsepower, but harnessing the 1,000 horsepower with the transmission that you need for that and a rear end and a drive shaft and all that stuff is a whole different thing. 93 Cobra. I have not run their Big Dogs one. If that's what you're talking about, the ported one, I have not seen it. Have you ever done? Will you ever do a rotary? I do want to run a rotary on the engine dyno. I've done some testing on the chassis dyno with a rotary. I remember one of the tests where we put on one of those flex fans. This is sounded like an airplane, and it lost a lot of power. Have I ever run 2 M90s on the V8? I didn't. I have not done that. Two more minutes. Oh, you're wanting to get your Corvair heads done. Cylinder heads were not an application that I would apply extrude hone to, because you have access to the bowl and everything on a cylinder head. Intake manifolds, especially like the Cobra and the long runner stuff that you can't get in and access, and they can. That's a much better application. Cylinder heads are you can get to everywhere. More 3800 stuff is coming. What are the best head gaskets to use for a 6-liter 823? We use the LS9 head gaskets, the factory LS9 head gaskets. Brian Tooley also has other ones, and we ran those at 1500. So I got to meet Bob or somebody. The question was, anybody remember Bob Norwood's nitro burning billet 4-cylinder that made 4,000 horsepower? I don't remember a 4,000 horsepower one, but I got to meet Bob out at a road and track top speed shootout that I took my Mustang to. Scott, thanks for showing up. Barry, how much boost can I put on a stock Lincoln Navigator? You need to be concerned about ring gap, but they will take boost. I've got some boosted modular stuff up. What's a typical air intake temp on a boosted application in a dyno cell? got to be more specific. Is it intercooled, non-intercooled? What boost level it is? Is it a turbo? Is it a blower? What's going on? Help me out. Borrow a 383 Mopar and put GT45s on it. Richard, this will be the last question. Richard, all the TPI testing tune port you did you ever run TBI heads with a TPI intake manifold? Always felt the TPI intake was better suited for TBI heads when it comes to low RPM torque. So why do you think that the TBI heads will make more torque than a TPI head? I honestly don't know what the difference is between those two. I don't remember ever flowing those or even looking at them back to back. Turbo V10. I want to see a turbo. Okay, I got to close out my poll here. 78% saying yes, they think that the Sprint 6-cylinder, excuse me, will get boost. I'm hoping so. Fingers crossed. Liv, are you listening? Thank you guys all for showing up. And I got to go finish up right now on the Pontiac 400 test between the 4-barrel and the 2-barrel. Which one do you think won? Thank you guys for showing up. I'll see you tomorrow. Wah, wah, wah.